So today I'm going to talk about the question that's on everybody's mind. How safe is it to fly in today's world? But first, I have a question for all of you. Did you hear about Delta's Flight 2129 from Minneapolis to Miami yesterday? That's because nothing happened. That's the whole point. We don't hear about all the good flights that happen. Every day in the United States airspace system, there are 35 to 45,000 flights operating. That's every day. 28 to 30,000 of those are airline flights. Worldwide, there's about 100,000 airline flights traveling every single day. But all you ever hear about is the problems. You never hear about all those good flights. And the news media, brings that kind of stuff to light. And so just like Frank was talking about, wheels falling off and stuff, that's what everybody hears about all the time. Let me give you just a few statistics of stuff in general about how many people die every year in the United States from different causes. Car accidents, 43,000 people on average. Bike accidents, 1,400 people. Motorcycle accidents, 5,000. Cancer patients, 613,000 people. Heart disease, 647,000 people. Slips and falls in bathtubs and stuff, 47,000 people. Shark attacks, 2 people. Lightning strikes, 15 to 20 people. Other related weather incidents, thunderstorms, heat, wind, tornadoes, hurricanes, about 600 people. That's per year in the United States. Guess when the last fatal accident was in the United States up until these accidents that happened this past January? Any guesses?
9/11.
Huh?
9/11.
No, not that far back, but close. 2009. In February of 2009, Colgan Air, which was a regional airline, crashed in Buffalo, New York. That was 16 years ago. That was the last fatal accident in the United States. The last major airline accident of a major airline was American Flight 587, and that's the flight that left New York shortly after 9/11, a couple months later, and it crashed going into Flushing Bay or whatever on takeoff, had a problem. But that's the last major airline accident 24 years ago. So think about that, just let it sink in for a while. Going back to the statistics I just gave you, on average, 43,000 people die in car accidents every year. But until January of this year, there had not been a fatal airline crash in 16 years. People don't hesitate to jump in their cars and go to work and run errands, but they're afraid to fly. Why? I blame 3 things for people being afraid to fly, and this is just my personal saying this. The news media. Every time anything happens to an airplane, it's headline news. Airplanes blow a tire on landing all the time. It's no big deal. Airplane turns back because they had a hydraulic problem. No big deal. Most commercial airliners have 2, if not 3, hydraulic systems. And this is true for all systems. Hydraulics, pneumatics, electrical, whatever it is, there's backups for backups for backups. Airplanes are famous for their redundant systems. Everything has a backup. Who in this room has seen one of my favorite movies, the movie Airplane? It's a classic. There's a scene in that movie that if you're not a pilot, probably doesn't make much sense to you. But at one point during the movie, the chief pilot walks into the room and he's wearing sunglasses, even though it's night, and he rips off his sunglasses, and underneath that is another pair of sunglasses. And again, it's kind of a funny thing to people when they see that, but people don't understand it. But pilots know instantaneously what that means. It's redundancy. In airplanes, there are multiple systems for everything. I flew Airbus aircraft for quite a while, and we used to laugh. One of the things that came out was for a certain system to fail, the answer if a a check pilot or anybody ever asks you the question, what would cause this to fail? It's multiple failures of redundant systems. So again, you can have one thing fail, it's not going to cause a problem. You can have two things fail, probably not going to cause a problem. It takes multiples for things to really cause problems. I read a blurb in the paper the other day about a Delta flight, number 1800, going from Atlanta to Montego Bay. And it canceled because of a mechanical. Huh? Hadn't even left the gate. Unless you were going to Montego Bay that day, who cares? But it made headline news. A month ago, I read another headline about a twin-engine airplane in England, someplace. It wasn't even in London or a big city. And it crashed and it killed 3 people. Nobody famous, nobody that anybody would know, yet it made headline news. And again, we're not even talking the United States. This is in another country. But all of a sudden, it's on the front page of the newspaper. Sometimes the news media, I think, is all about fear. It would be boring to say that 45,000 flights a day operated safely on any given day. So they want to talk about what happened wrong with airplanes. Number 2, I say, is the internet and social media. Google search engine only started in 1998, 27 years ago. Since that time, things are available instantaneously. Anything that happens is at your fingertips right away. People start to comment immediately about facts of things as soon as an accident happens or an incident happens. You all remember Air India crash here just 2 months ago, it's still on people's minds. Literally, the day after that crash, people were posting that they knew exactly what happened to that airplane and why it crashed. And it's interesting that it takes the professionals a year or more to come up with the correct answer of why that plane crashed, yet because of this instantaneous gratification that people have these days, they can tell you immediately why that plane crashed. Everyone is an expert now. I've literally had people walk into the cockpit of my airplane and offer me assistance in case anything happens because they have Microsoft Flight Simulator on their computer and they read how to fly a 787 on the internet. And that is a true statement. Literally, I've had people come up and say that.
We need a minute.
Yeah. Believe me, it's tough not to be rude while holding back the laughter when somebody comes up to the cockpit and says that. Number 3, I think this is one of the biggest things, is pilots close the door to the cockpit. And years ago, long time ago, cockpit doors used to stay open. But after accidents and hijackings and stuff in the 70s, they finally said, okay, we got to close these cockpit doors. I understand that. But there's something in human nature that wants to be in control. Now all of a sudden you're in a metal tube, getting ready to take off. Someone is controlling your destiny, and you have no idea who that person is or what they even look like. And that's tough for people. So to me, in my humble opinion, those are the 3 things that really cause a lot of fear in people when it comes to flying. Let me talk about what goes into an airline flight itself. Maintenance. Frank was talking about maintenance. In order to become a mechanic at an airline, you have to go through A&P school. A&P stands for Airframe and Power Plant. It's an 18 to 24-month technical school. Also, there's on-the-job training. People will go to the local airport and learn, and you can count hours as you're working with a mechanic. And that counts to get your license. As far as an airplane is concerned, at an airline, and this is airline stuff and is slightly different, or majorly different from general aviation stuff flying out of Lake Elmo. There's all sorts of stuff that goes into a flight. Every day, there's a daily check. That's a daily inspection. Kick the tires, check the oil, check the hydraulics, just like, making sure everything's all right. Then it gets into big inspections. The first one's called an A check. Every 400 to 600 hours, they do an inspection on an airplane. It's a routine inspection. After that, there's a B check. It's less frequent than an A check, but it's a more thorough inspection. After that, there's a C check. Every 18 to 24 months, there's extensive disassembly and examination of an airplane. Finally comes the D check. That's every 5 to 10 years, they fully disassemble the airplane and examine every part. Then comes the big daddy of them all, the Q check. Q check is an A through D check all wrapped up into one big package, and they literally take the airplane apart and put it back together. And when I was working in the simulators in Charlotte, the hangar was right next to the simulator building, and I had the opportunity a few times to go over to the hangars when they were doing Q checks, and the airplane is literally in pieces laying on the floor. There's other checks. ETOPS check, extended range twin engine operation performance standards check. Every time a flight goes overseas, over water, 162 miles from land basically, it requires an ETOPS check. So every one of those international flights, and it'll even go so far as to say, like, if we would take off from Charlotte and have a mechanical problem and land in Boston, we had to get another ETOPS check. So every time you start a flight, you have to have that ETOPS check for going over the water. Plane reliability has gotten much better over the years. Engines can run thousands and thousands of hours before having any sort of failures. Back in the old days in the simulator world, one of our #1 goals was teaching people about engine failures. What happens if an engine failure is right at takeoff? What happens if it happens, right before landing? These days, even though we still talk about that kind of stuff, we don't talk about it as much because engines have become so reliable. They just don't quit anymore. There's all sorts of other stuff too. All sorts of new things have become available. New aircraft seats, new seat belts, aircraft skins, new avionics and cockpit instrumentation. Everybody knows about Endeavour Flight 4819 in Toronto. Great example of new designs in airplanes. That was one of those type of accidents that really did shine to show people how impressive new aircraft technology is. The airplane basically crash landed. When it flipped over, its wing broke off, its tail broke off, the engines kind of started to separate, but the cabin stayed totally intact. Nothing happened to it. Everybody got out of that airplane with a few, minor injuries here and there, but the cabin stayed intact. Flight attendants, that's another new thing, or big thing. As new hires, they go through initial airline training, then they have annual recurrent training. Their training includes classroom training, door simulators, emergency equipment reviews, and evacuation drills proving and demonstrating that they can do an evacuation. My wife Janet was a flight attendant for 14 years. You can ask her, she'll tell you about all the training they used to do. It's pretty intense for those people. When the Endeavour flight crashed in Toronto, it was a classic, great example of flight attendants doing their job. And again, everybody sees flight attendants as somebody who walks up and down the aisles with their drinks, but they really are there for your safety. Everybody got off that airplane, which was upside down, with just a few minor injuries. Weather. We can't control the weather, but we can learn about it. All sorts of talk these days about weather changes in the world. Personally, I haven't dealt with any weather that's worse today than it was 45 years ago. It's just, kind of changing things around a little bit, but yeah, it's still the same. Pilots deal with thunderstorms in the summer. We deal with icing and snow in the winter. It's a tragedy when a plane crashes, but one thing is we always learn from those crashes. Procedures change and new equipment is introduced. In July of 1994, US Air Flight 1016 crashed in Charlotte. We were living in Charlotte at the time when that plane crashed. It was amazing because we were going to a baseball game that night, and all of a sudden we heard that there was a plane crash at the airport because of a thunderstorm. And we're looking around going, it's clear. What's the problem? And there was one cell over the airport. It just so happened that that cell had what's called a microburst in it, and it was one of the worst, to this day, recorded microbursts ever in history. And that airplane just happened to be landing at that exact instant when the microburst hit the airport. After that accident, one of the things that came from that was Doppler radar. Doppler radar, for those of you who don't know what that is, if you're driving around and you see sometimes in the fields that tower with a big white ball on top of it, that's a Doppler radar system. And Doppler radar has been around for years, but they finally started putting it into airplane use after that accident. Basically, Doppler radar is a bouncing beam that goes back and forth, and it can detect objects, thunderstorms, location, speed, and distance. And by having that information, so now they're scattered at different places, so you can see all over the airport what's happening. That airport, or that crash in Charlotte, the weather on one end of the airport was totally different than the weather on the other end of the airport, and the pilots had no clue. Radar in planes have also gotten a lot better. They're now in color, have more functions such as auto tilt. Radars only indicate liquid water. They are there for reporting rain. One thing that comes out a lot in the news, again, is a turbulence mode. There is a turbulence mode on a radar, but it only detects heavy rain. It does not detect turbulence. It detects kind of turbulence because of the heavier rain, which is associated with turbulence, but it does not show us where turbulence is. Pilots, we look at weather before the flight, during the flight. We get weather updates all the time. We can talk to other pilots. We talk to air traffic controllers. We're all sending messages back and forth, so we know what's going on most of the time. But every once in a while, something happens. Delta Flight 56, just a couple of weeks ago, going from Salt Lake City to Amsterdam, diverted to Minneapolis because it got into severe turbulence. News media said the pilots couldn't see it because it didn't show up on their radar. It's not going to show up on their radar. In the winter, airliners are equipped with anti-icing and de-icing equipment. Great systems that we have. And then you have airports too, like Minneapolis Airport wins best snow removal year after year after year for this size of airport. Air traffic control, talk about that a little bit. The ATC has been understaffed for years, and that's a big thing right now. Everybody's going, oh, ATC, we got problems. But that's only part of the problem. Also, we have outdated equipment. That's the biggest problem. That should have been fixed years ago. And finally, the FAA has announced that they're going to change all the ATC systems around the country. But it's going to take years because there's a lot of systems that need to be replaced. It will not be done overnight. It takes a controller about, about a few years to become a qualified controller. Back in the 70s and 80s, the washout rate was incredible for controllers. 70 to 80% of people going to air traffic control school busted out. So consequently, it took a long time to get somebody up to speed. As the years have gone on, things have gotten a little bit kinder and gentler, and now it's down to about a 20 to 30% bust out rate. But still, it's a high washout rate for a person who wants to become a controller. It's a stressful job. Part of that reason is because students now are getting more time to get qualified and trained, which has been a huge help in getting people through programs without being washed out. A lot has been said lately about the air traffic controller in DC. American had a crash with the helicopters, again, you all know about last January, first crash in 16 years for an airliner, and that became a real issue for people to go, why did this happen? What just went wrong? And a lot of people pointed fingers at the controller, saying he took two sectors and put them into one. So during busy times, you might have two controllers or four controllers working a couple of different sectors, but at night when things slow down, they'll mix it all into one and just put the systems together. A very common practice. It is not an unsafe practice at all. It's just something they do in the evening. So that had nothing to do with that accident. It's just one of those things, unfortunately. I saved the best for last, pilots. Most airline pilots have thousands of hours. Every year, we're subject to two physicals. We have quarterly computer-based training. We have simulator training from 1 to 3 days long, every 6, 9, or 12 months, depending on the airline and how you've worked out your stuff with the FAA. You get a line check every 2 years, random drug and alcohol testing, and random line checks by the FAA or a company-designated pilot anytime they feel like jumping in the plane. We are inspected over and over and over again. It's unbelievable. A safe pilot is always learning. I always tell new student pilots when they get their license, I tell them, you just got a license to learn. I've never had a perfect flight in my life. I will never have a perfect flight in my life because I learn something on every flight I take, whether I'm in my Piper Cherokee at Lake Elmo Airport or flying a 787. Nobody is perfect. Everybody makes mistakes, but they pay us a lot of money to mitigate those mistakes and make and handle them in the most professional way we possibly can. My final thoughts are some things to make your flight more safe. Listen to the crew and know the type of airplane you're in. My wife and I always count the rows of seats between us and the nearest exit. That way, if a plane crashes, fills with smoke, you can feel your way to an exit. Even if you're a seasoned traveler, take a look at the briefing card every once in a while. I'm not saying every flight, but just every once in a while. And again, since every plane is different, you might not know where the door is and you think you do. Not all planes are the same, and exits can be in different locations. Number 2, keep your seatbelts fastened at all times when you're in your seat. It's fine to loosen them, but keep them on. I talked earlier about Delta Flight 56 with the severe turbulence. 25 people were injured on that flight, and most of them were because they didn't have their seatbelts on. They went bouncing off the ceiling. If they had at least had their seatbelts on loosely, they would have stayed in their seats. In the cockpit, we always keep our seatbelts on. When I would make announcements, that was one of the things I would always say, please keep your seatbelts fastened like we do in the cockpit. And, like I said, we've got them on all the time. Number 3, if you have to evacuate an airplane, leave your bags behind. Everybody wants to grab their bags. I know it's just one of those things. American Airlines had a flight 3023, did an evacuation in Denver just a couple weeks ago. Of course, there's videos instantly because everybody's an expert and has their cameras out. And it's amazing to watch people coming down the slides with backpacks on. In this case, it was just a blown tire. But if the airplane was on fire, you need to get out as quickly as you can. You all remember the US Airways flight Miracle on the Hudson with Sully. I remember watching that on TV and seeing a guy walk out on the wing with a garment bag in his hand. The wing was slippery. He fell off the wing into the water, popped up without his garment bag, and they pulled him back to safety. And as everybody knows, everybody lived through that accident. No bag is worth your life. Leave it behind. The FAA does evacuation testing every time a new aircraft model comes out. Each airline is required to complete an evacuation of a full airplane, whether it's a 747 or a DC-9, in 90 seconds. And it's all based on the number of exits and how many people are on the plane. But these tests are done with professionals, with check pilots, with flight attendant supervisors, with standards people. They're not done with the general public. Also, we know it's coming. And so when those tests are done, people are jumping out of the airplane and they can do it in 90 seconds. In reality, there's a problem on our hands right now. People have gotten heavier. People are traveling more with disabilities than they ever have. And people are reaching for their bags. And that's what we don't understand. It'll be interesting to see what happens, whether they will start putting more doors on airplanes or just leave it alone, but something's got to give. So back to my original question. How safe is it to fly in today's world? I think very safe. I don't hesitate to get on an airplane, whether it's a pilot or a passenger. Are there risks involved? Absolutely. But every morning, when you wake up and put your feet on the floor, there's a chance you could slip and fall, because remember, 47,000 people die a year from falls in the US. Thank you. Okay. Any questions from anybody? Yes.
How much flying is done by computer? Because my nephew is a chopper pilot, and he said pretty much everything's computerized. And I'm like, I hope the heck you guys don't do it doesn't work.
That was a huge problem here a few years ago. So airlines in the industry got to the point where they were asking people to use the autopilot as much as possible. And if you remember Air France crash about 15 years ago in the Atlantic Ocean, it was an Airbus 330, and it got into a storm. It had some problems, ended up crashing and killing everybody. It was a horrible accident. Part of the problem of that accident was the pilots had no experience and they had no idea what they did. If they had just let the airplane, if they turned the autopilots off, let the airplane balance itself out, they would have saved the day. But neither one of them really had the skills. It's whole different training in different countries and stuff. That's a whole nother story. But the bottom line is, after that accident, all of a sudden the FAA came in and said, we need to get people to start hand flying more. And so the whole industry switched from totally everything on autopilot to let's do some more hand flying. Me personally, when I would fly a trip, I would hand fly the airplane up to 10 or 15,000 feet, turn the autopilot on, stay on the whole cruise, and then when I was descending down anywhere from 10 to 5,000 feet, I'd turn it off and hand fly it in. And you know, if it was really, really bad weather and I'd just flown 14 hours, then maybe I'd let the autopilot do the approach. Airplanes are perfectly capable to do auto landings. There's certain times where we have to let the airplane land, but most of the time, you know, 99% of the time I'm landing myself. So.
You know, Joe, as we all know, we're crammed into airplanes. They can't get enough people into these airplanes. If there's a fire or something on board, how in the world can we, I mean, you can hardly get off the plane when the plane lands and you're lining up to get off the plane. How can people get off if the plane's on fire and, you know, smoky and all that? What would be the rate of death in a case like that?
It all depends on, you know, how the accident is. The airplane twisted into a bunch of metal and it's hard to find exits, or did it break in half and there's wide open, you know, gaps to get out of? It's kind of an unanswerable question. But again, it gets back into this whole thing with the bags and all that kind of stuff. Get off the airplane any way you can, as fast as you can, but leave your bags behind. So, yes?
I have a question on a positive statement, because you read the media just as the negative. But my question is, how safe is it when there's lightning? Because I'm told you do not want to be around metal, and I'm surrounded by metal if there's lightning out there.
You know, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, and then just a positive statement was 9/11. I think everyone says it's amazing how quick they got everybody down. And were you, I want to know your perspective of that day. What did you see happening at being on that side of it all?
So I'll start with the lightning question. Airplanes have what are called lightning wicks, static wicks, all over the wings and tails and that kind of stuff. And if you get struck by lightning, which happens all the time, again, it's a very common event, it goes right out the lightning wicks. You'll never know. Because it's like I said, it's a metal tube, but they're designed, and even newer airplanes like the new 787s and Airbuses that are carbon fiber based, that's most of their stuff. It's designed for lightning strikes to go right out these static wicks. And you know, we'll be flying along and get hit by lightning, and usually the, you know, event is maybe a little hole in the side of the plane or something where, no, I don't want to scare you. You know, just, you know, I mean, but you'll see where it hit. It'll burn the airplane, just like if it hits a tree and it burns the tree, the same thing. But again, airplanes are designed to take those hits. Just like wings, you know, when they do aircraft design, and people talk about wings flapping, you know, when you get in turbulence and stuff, you know you're safe when the wing is flapping. If the wing isn't flapping, that's when it's not safe. That's kind of the going joke. When they do those tests, those wings will flap 30, 40 feet before they break. I mean, it's incredible how much flexibility is in a wing. And same with the Lightning. They are designed to take hits, and they are designed to discharge them out these wicks without doing anything to the airplane safety-wise at all. Yeah. The 9/11 thing, so I happened to be home that day, luckily. And so my nephew had called and said, "Are you watching the TV?" And I went, "No, I don't turn the TV on in the morning." And he goes, "You need to turn the TV on." And so we, sat and watched the whole thing happen. But I do know a lot of, friends of mine who were out flying that day, and yeah, it was quite an experience for everybody. But like I said, luckily I was home that day. So, yes.
Just a question, so you have obviously a plane up here in Lake Elmo.
I'm in a flying club, so yeah, I have one at Lake Elmo and 5 at Crystal.
Okay, does that club have like where a person like myself could go and actually you would take me for a low flight, like Benson Air does in White Bear for me? Like, do they do that here?
So at the airport, there's Lake Elmo Aero is a fixed base operator. It's called an FBO, and they do have airplanes that people can take rides in and all that stuff. With the club, it's just we just go out and.
Yeah, it's not like a paid thing. It's more like a volunteer. I know I've worked with somebody in Benson Airport where I live. It's been many years now. But he's like, no, it's part of like what our club does. Like we want people to come and ask to fly with us.
Exactly. Yeah, and yeah, anytime anybody wants to come fly with me, have at it. That's my happy space is in the air.
That's just like fun little knowledge. I know we had like a pancake breakfast they invited me to. I mean, it was great people. And they showed me like obviously all kinds of big buildings of, it was weird. A lot of them like obviously have airplanes, but there's fire trucks. They're like, they stored a whole bunch of stuff in this airport.
Oh yeah.
And this was a small town.
One question.
Yes.
Seems like the communication between the private and the military is reduced. The incident at Black Hawk out east and then the B-52 up in North Dakota. Is that really the case, or is that just a perception?
That's a real problem. And it used to be, like when I first started flying, the military aircraft were on one frequency and all the other civilian aircraft were on another frequency. And so it was a real problem because you couldn't even hear them. Nowadays, they have fixed it. And so most of the time, everybody's kind of talking on the same frequency, but there are still some military frequencies that we don't have access to. And so again, that's one of the things that in the air traffic system, they're trying to hammer that all out because, even around the world, when we're flying around the world, English is the language of choice no matter where you're flying. And when you're in other countries, they might start speaking a little bit of their language too, but it all comes right back to English so everybody can understand where everybody is. So.
That's it. Time's up.
Thank you so much.